Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Hitachi Solutions webinar. Our topic today is metrics that matter with respect to engineering, design, and global collaboration. I'm your host, Dinah Kennens, and joining us today is our featured speaker, Emily Kazakov. Emily is a business analyst and project manager for the Hitachi Solutions knowledge management practice, and she has over 14 years of IT experience with a specific focus on portals and collaboration and knowledge management over the past 5 years. Emily's been fortunate to help customers develop and implement their intranet solutions with organizations such as Suncor, TransCanada Pipelines, and the Calgary Food Bank, to name a few. We're very excited to have Emily sharing her knowledge and expertise with us today. And with that, we'll pose our first question to Emily. So, Emily, what are the challenges that we're seeing today around collaborative engineering with respect to globalization?
All right, so just to introduce the topic a little bit and give some background, when you think about engineering and design, it's about bringing the latest and best innovation to the marketplace, whether that be in product engineering, construction, architecture, etc. And so a lot of these companies now, what we're seeing is that their budgets are getting smaller, and there's a little bit more pressure and competition in the marketplace out there to get that next greatest innovation to the marketplace, as well as the time that these companies have to respond to the marketplace is also shrinking, and they're expected to come up with new designs and new innovations at a much faster rate. So because of this situation, what we've seen amongst this industry, as well as many other industries, is that there's a lot of outsourcing to different partners and vendors and suppliers around the world, and a lot of them could be across time zones, across functional, cultural barriers. And so we need a way to bring all of these people together to move ahead with these designs and to move ahead with this type of engineering in order to reduce the costs and respond to the marketplace a little bit faster as well. So with all of these different groups of people in different locations, it starts to become a little bit difficult for everyone to work together to collaborate on product designs, changes, and development. And so it's a little bit difficult now where people might be using a number of different systems, different tools, might not be compatible. There could be sharing issues with sending documents, with versioning of documents, when it comes to responding to RFPs, and that stands for request for proposal from vendors. That typically has been a long, kind of drawn out paper-based process, and so there is a need to make that a little bit more seamless and quicken up the pace of being able to turn those types of contracts around. Along with some of this global collaboration is there can be a little bit more risk involved as you're dealing with greater volume of data, as well as security breaches. You want to try to prevent that as much as possible. And then the nitty-gritty of the document control, just the ability for different groups in different parts of the world to be able to edit documents, make sure that everyone has the same version of the latest document, that you don't have any conflicts with trying to reconcile when you have many different people potentially changing documents at the same time. And then overall, there may be a lack of common key performance indicators where it's difficult to tell if, with all of these different groups around the world trying to work together, if they're able to make sure they're meeting their goals of reducing cost of bringing their products to market, as well as making sure that they're able to process their changes quickly as possible and reduce just the overall start to finish cycle of product development.
Great. So with respect to the challenges that you just addressed, what are the areas upon which we can improve, or how can we resolve this challenge?
Right. So just a few more details about that. When it comes to this design, the collaboration between the different groups is to make sure that the systems are compatible with each other. And one step above that is to extract all of these documents to one layer that covers all of the different groups of people so that there is a central management tool. So the documents only exist in one location, and then it's much easier for all of these different groups to work together. When it comes to RFP management, in order to make that an easier process and a faster turnaround time for processing these contracts, it would be easier for groups to have a collaboration solution where vendors could easily download documents to bid on pieces of work that they would like to participate in, submit their bids within a collaboration system, and then the engineering company, construction company, whatever it may be, can easily go through these bids, approve the work, and then once everyone starts get going on these projects, is they have a shared space to share this contract, share the documents, and process any changes that are coming up. And that ties right into document control, where you want to make sure that the documents are well organized, the version history and the edit history is clearly tracked and audited, and everyone is working from the latest, most recent copy of documents. And for mitigating risk, once we have everyone in the same system working together on the same set of documents, you are not having as many issues where there's multiple copies of documents in multiple systems, which means that copies of documents might mysteriously walk out the door. If they're all in one system, at least you can focus your security on one tool and make it bulletproof, as well as have some agreements in place with a number of different groups using that tool to centralize the protection against the breach of terms and conditions and the confidentiality as far as information leaking to competitors or groups who have left. And then overall, trying to measure some of those KPIs, you want to find a little bit more empirical evidence that the process is working rather than just your gut feel. So we're going to get into some of those KPI metrics, the specifics, in a couple of slides. But overall, you just want to look at some things that you can actually measure, such as the reduction in the design cycle change time, number of documents that might need to be recreated, and those types of things to make sure that your process is working.
Great. Now, with based on your experience, what are the leaders or best-in-class companies doing to address these challenges and to support global engineering collaboration?
Right. So to begin to measure some of these KPIs, a good starting point is to first standardize your tools and your processes so that you don't have a number of disparate systems, people working in silos. You need to centralize everyone's process for document collaboration. And then you can start to measure and analyze some of these KPIs and then improve the performance of all the different people working in different areas. And so then you can start to track how long it might take you to process these design change requests, approve changes. You measure how much data might be being entered incorrectly, and to see if that number starts to decrease and what have you. For the RFP management, I know we've talked a little bit about that already, but an example of a way that this can work is what you're seeing on the right-hand side of the slide there. Is we have a solution right now called the RFP management solution, where it's just a simple collaborative space where companies can post their RFPs, vendors can take a look at them, download them, fill them out, which is essentially them bidding on the work, where they upload it back to the system. There's a number of workflows in place so that the owning company, engineering, construction, whatever it may be, can then go through and approve the designs from the vendors that they have selected. and then grant them access to a shared collaboration space so that everyone can work better together. For document control, we have a few more examples here when it comes to better flow of information and the digital sharing. Another example of something that our company's worked on, it's a couple years back, but it's something that's still relevant today. It's a company called Spin Master, and they manufacture a number of toys. Their flagship product was AirHog, which you might be familiar with if you have a young boy at home. And these are essentially flying toys, could be helicopters, flying discs, what have you. And this company, it was a startup company in Toronto in the mid-90s, and now they've grown to be a billion-dollar company. But essentially the business problem that they were encountering when we were working with them about 3 or 4 years ago was that they were trying to speed up their overall design process because their toys were being manufactured in China, and their suppliers, their contractors, vendors were in many different parts of the world. Design was happening in North America, and the groups were quite dispersed. So they were encountering all the problems that we've talked about so far. And what we helped them develop was an intranet basically for them to share all of their product information. And so they had a catalog of information that everyone could refer to, and then all of the designs and the drawings and the changes were being processed in one central place. And there was also HR information, communication information, and it was completely transparent to the rest of the company so that each group is being held accountable to their goals. And each operations group also had a collection of KPIs that they were measuring actively to track how their process was improving, as well as a lot of good documentation around their roles and responsibilities, their backups, to make sure that it was much easier for people to know who the right person was to contact, and how to get changes approved faster and to get work done more quickly. And so we were very happy to help them out with that. In terms of risk mitigation, you want to make sure that your system is fine-tuned so that you can detect if there's any issues in the process. Another example of this, which we worked on recently, was for TransCanada Pipelines with their major projects group. And that's essentially where they have a number of partners and vendors. Many of them could be million-dollar projects, multi-million-dollar projects, and they just needed a simple online space to collaborate on these types of documents. And so we implemented a solution involving SharePoint Online. So SharePoint is essentially Microsoft's platform for knowledge management, document management, and collaboration. And so we created this space for them, similar to the RFP management solution, but basically where vendors, partners, and members of TransCanada Pipelines could work together in one space, share documents easily. Everyone had their profile. There were no security issues, and they were in one central location to be able to complete these projects. And getting into the design collaboration, you just want to make sure that this environment is well structured, and that you have some good workflows in place to speed things along.
That's great. What would you say are some metrics that our audience should keep in mind, or to elaborate, what would you say best-in-class companies are doing to measure and determine effectiveness and efficiency?
Right. So what you see here on this slide is where we're diving into a few more specifics of what those metrics actually are. And those are around document control, risk mitigation, and design and manufacturing collaboration. So getting into those specifics, you want to track things like the number of times documents might need to be recreated, any data entry errors. You can actually track the number of hours if you're looking at some of the deltas of how long documents are being checked out, checked in, if it's a long versus a shorter span of time. If companies have encountered any problems with fines or penalties or breaches of their security, you want to track if those numbers are decreasing, obviously. And for design, you want to just essentially make sure that the number of times that people are having to redo work, redraw their designs, or repeating any part of the process of this design process, any part of that process is decreasing. And also that comes to manufacturing as well, where you want to make sure that any of these incremental changes in the product development, that they're being processed faster, more smoothly, the approvals are happening easier in an automated system with better workflow, and that your numbers are coming down there too.
Great. Now, how would you get a customer thinking about the current state of their business as it relates to what we're talking about today?
Right. So there's a number of questions that companies can ask themselves to determine if there are places that they can be improving. Many of these things might be obvious now that we've kind of gone through this material, but just some of the general questions to ask yourself is if it's a lengthy and difficult, painful process to go through the design change end to end, and there are places there that could obviously use some improvement, that's a pretty good indicator that something like this could be helpful for you. If it's difficult for groups around the world or just dispersed in different locations, even if that's all on one continent, to make sure that they're accessing the same information and that they have the same version of documents if there's been issues that you've encountered with that. If there's still a dependence on hard copies versus electronic, that could be something that would be improved by moving that into an online collaboration system. And just if there's those barriers between vendors, suppliers, contractors, etc., where it's difficult to distribute and review information. These are all questions that you can ask yourself to figure out if something like this might be able to help you.
That's great. Now, there's been a lot of great information that you covered today. In terms of takeaways, what are the top 3 things that our audience should remember?
Right. So overall, all of this information aside, for just some quick takeaways of a few things that you could do to improve your process is to take a look at all of the systems, all of the tools that you might be using to share information, and see if there's ways that you can centralize that, where you can bring libraries and sets of documents into one central location so that it becomes much easier for groups to make sure that they're just using the latest information. And then hopefully that's going to help your employees and all of the different vendors, contractors, et cetera, who are involved in your projects, where they are a little bit better connected and there's less rework that needs to be done. Another big part of that is making sure that everyone's following the same process and they're using the same kinds of tools so that they're not having conflicts with access and sharing of information. And that's another big part of centralization. And then to start to think about ways that you can measure how well this collaborative process is working. So setting up a few critical success factors to make sure that you're meeting your goals, and just trying to determine a little bit if you're able to improve your cost management and increase the speed of your ability to respond to the marketplace.
That's great. Now, for folks that are interested in learning more, how do they get started, and what do those next steps look like?
Right. So if you feel that some of this information could help you improve your processes in your business, it's very easy to engage Hitachi Solutions, where we can sit down with you to schedule a workshop and start to identify some of your pain points and figure out what kinds of solutions and technologies might be able to help you. And that could be a quick intro conversation, or it could be something where we take a little bit of a closer look at your business to identify a strategy and a roadmap for you to best figure out ways to improve your process, and put together a bit of a roadmap for steps that you can take to get yourself on more of a global solution, where you can meet some of these benchmarks a little bit easier and you can compete more amongst the industry. And that can involve a lot of different conversations, gap assessment, departmental interviews, and so forth. It's really up to you how you would like to, the level of involvement, but the first step would be to contact us, and then we can get that conversation going.
Great. Well, that concludes today's webinar. Emily, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with us on that topic today. A friendly reminder to our audience that details regarding our workshop are available on your screen. Please contact myself, Dinah Kennons. My contact details are in the bottom left-hand corner there to learn more about this opportunity. Thanks very much again for joining us. That concludes today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you as well.